Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating philosophical text from 2011 by an author named Shufeng. It's titled Examining Whether You Belong to the Masses. What we're going to do today is take a totally impartial, structured look at how this text maps out human experience. Basically, it splits humanity into two distinct camps, the masses versus the awakened. So let's jump right in and see exactly how this framework defines our reality.
Okay, let's dive into this. Right from the jump, the text actually draws on this classic concept from the Buddha about saving all sentient beings. But then, it pivots and narrows it down to one very pointed, kind of intense question for us. Do you belong to the masses? It really makes you stop and reflect, doesn't it? I mean, who exactly fits into this massive collective group? And what are the actual traits that put someone there?
Well, the author gives us a very specific definition. According to the text, being part of the masses basically means living in a state of confusion and ambiguity. It's categorized by this lack of clear understanding and, crucially, a lack of ultimate direction in life. And what's interesting here is that this isn't framed as an insult. Not at all. It's presented as just an objective categorization. So if your life lacks an overarching clarity or a definitive ultimate purpose, well, according to Xuefeng, you fit this criteria. But you might be wondering, is that actually a bad thing? The text breaks this down by looking at two sides of just living a normal, ordinary life. On side A, there are real merits to this. Living simply, laughing, crying, enduring the hard times, enjoying the comfortable times, and just kind of thinking, hey, all's well. That's the upside. But then we have side B. And side B presents one singular critical downside to living this way, the absolute absence of a true future. And in this framework, that is an incredibly heavy cost. And this brings us to a really pivotal moment in the text, where your baseline assumptions get completely challenged. The author says, if you doubt this downside, like if you're sitting there thinking, wait, I definitely have a future, you need to ask yourself this exact question. Where is my future? It's a direct challenge meant to sort of pierce right through that comforting simplicity of side A we just talked about. By asking this, you're forced to project your mind forward and really examine what's coming. And as you'll see in a second, the text's definition of what lies ahead is way, way bigger than what most of us usually think about. So the crucial point is exactly how Shufeng defines this word, future. We're not talking about your 5-year career plan here or your retirement goals. The future is defined as the path ahead, and not just tomorrow, or even the rest of your earthly life. We're talking about the road that lies beyond all of that. Where exactly does your path lead after your earthly life wraps up? The text argues that if you don't confidently know the answer to that specific question, you're essentially just wandering. Now, to actually secure this true future, the author says a massive shift has to happen, and that shift is awakening. This is the ultimate, non-negotiable step to stop being part of the masses. But what does awakening actually mean in this context? Well, it's defined as the act of perceiving life's phenomena through your senses to grasp their true nature. So it's not just intellectual, it's a very active, experiential process. The argument is that the exact moment you finally grasp the true nature of reality, boom, you step out of the masses. The text actually gets incredibly specific about the tools you need for this process. It outlines 6 specific senses that have to be used. You've got your standard, everyday physical 5, right? Sight, hearing, smell, taste, and touch. But then, an absolutely crucial 6th sense is added to the mix, intuition. The author claims it's only by deeply, intentionally engaging all 6 of these senses together that you can finally penetrate the surface level of life and grasp the true nature of existence. But, and this is a huge but, there's a major caveat here. Trying to achieve this awakening entirely on your own is described as being incredibly difficult. Why? Because the amount of knowledge required is just vast. We're talking about understanding the origins of the universe, time, space, consciousness, human emotions, desires, the whole shebang. And as the text explicitly points out, life is too short. Our time here on Earth is strictly limited. So the sheer volume of metaphysical knowledge you'd need to master is just way too immense for one single human lifespan. Plus, it's not just that time is short, it's that our time is already spoken for. I mean, think about it. Most of our brief lives are spent just managing the mundane, daily basics of survival, finding food, getting clothing, maintaining shelter, and just navigating the endless cycle of life and death. These everyday distractions of survival eat up nearly all of our time and energy. And that leaves us with almost zero capacity to tackle that massive system of knowledge you'd need to awaken on your own. Let's move on and see how this builds. Because having established this really massive problem that awakening is totally necessary but practically impossible to pull off alone while, just trying to survive, the text actually proposes a way out. It outlines two distinct paths for spiritual progression. The first path is all about synthesizing the teachings of historical sages, and the second path involves entering a specific group called Life Chan Yuan. Let's break down each of these options. So, path one relies entirely on the sages. The instruction here is to deeply listen to the teachings of major historical and spiritual heavyweights. We're talking Jesus Christ, the Buddha Shakyamuni, the sage Laozi, and the Prophet Muhammad. The core idea is that if you can somehow integrate the teachings of all these gods, Buddhas, celestial beings, and saints, then yes, you will absolutely awaken. But, as you can probably guess, fully absorbing and synthesizing the profound teachings of all these incredibly distinct historical figures, well, that still requires an immense amount of time, energy, and unwavering dedication.
And that leads us straight to path two. The text says that if you don't have the time or energy to master all those profound historical teachings, there is an even simpler way. And this simpler option is to enter Life Chan Yuan and just follow the path laid out by its guide. Now, just to be clear, as an explainer, we're simply impartially reporting the framework exactly as it's presented in the source text, but this specific group, Life Chan Yuan, is explicitly positioned by the author as a streamlined, much more accessible alternative for everyday people who just don't have the capacity to synthesize all the world's great religious traditions by themselves.
Now, the author actually acknowledges that this second path might sound a little self-serving, right? So a very practical taste test is offered to let you verify the authenticity of this guide for yourself, and this brilliantly illustrates how those senses we talked about earlier come into play. The text literally tells the reader to use their own sensory experience. If your interaction with the guide feels sour, bitter, or astringent, the verdict is clear. He's a fraud. And the action? Just kick him away. But on the flip side, if the experience is spicy, sweet, or fragrant, it suggests the guide is truly enlightened, and you should follow them closely. So it ultimately puts the final judgment right back into the hands, or rather the senses, of the individual. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer, and leaves us with a really provocative final thought. We've seen exactly how this framework defines the masses. We've looked at the necessity of securing a quote-unquote true future, and we've explored the two proposed paths to awakening. But ultimately, the text leaves the final choice entirely in your hands. So, based on this conceptual map, what do you think? Are you ready to really engage those senses and test your own path forward, or are you content to just remain with the masses? It's a big question. Keep questioning, keep learning, and keep seeking clarity.